Good morning, folks. Yes, this is going to be a little unscripted today. In fact, I'm gonna have to keep it really short. Unfortunately, I had a bit of an overscheduling problem today, but I had to do something. Comedy icon, American treasure, Tommy Smothers died last night at the age of 86. And originally, I was just going to do a simple myself post on this, but then I'm like, no, to anyone who's available to reach out right now, I'd like to hear your favorite memories of Tommy Smothers as well. And again, since it's going to be a short one, if you don't make it, please list that in the comments below. But the Smothers Brothers were more than simply a comedy duo. They were folk musicians, they were political activists, they were satirists, and they managed to reinvent themselves so many times in the last 6+ decades. You have to give them huge props. Oh, and little known fact, there was one particular Hollywood celebrity actually who wouldn't even acknowledge them in public, and I'm gonna get back to that one later. But for right now, I want to keep it. Oh, look, we have a couple people who've actually joined us. John is with us. John, how you doing? And he says, "R.I.P. Tommy Smothers." Oh, and GR, thank you for joining us today. And GR says, "Sorry to hear that. R.I.P. Tommy." And Tom the Hungry Jerk is here, and Tom says, "Hi guys, hello to you too, Tom. Tom, right now we're paying tribute to another Tom, Tommy Smothers, who of course we lost yesterday. Apparently, much like the Marx Brothers, originally their act was going to be solely music. They were trying to get on board with the folk scene in the early '60s, but Tommy was never fully comfortable, believe it or not, as a musician. He felt he wasn't quite up to that par, but he loved to kind of lampoon the act in between numbers. And much like the Marx Brothers, more and more people found that that landed even more than their music. So that little go between they used to do became the act. Oh, another thing, according to both Tom and Dickie Smothers, those little fights they had were carbon copies of fights they had in real life. Apparently, like all brothers, they bickered. So I guess art does imitate life in this case. Keith E says, "I'm joining you." Why? Am I coming apart? I'm sorry, Keith. You guys know I can't keep anything somber. Comedy is how I deal with things. So even though the loss of this national treasure is a very sad occasion, if I seem glib, it's not because I'm minimalizing the loss. It's because, well, I'm emotionally unstable, and comedy is how I cope with trauma. And you know what? Based on what I know of Tommy Smothers, I don't think he'd want a somber set off. I think he'd want people to remember the comedy and keep it light, as it were. Tom says his brother owned a winery in Napa. Yes, he actually lives. He actually lives right on that vineyard, very Falcon Crest. And John says that their entertainment was intelligent and didn't talk down to the audience. That was actually what got them in trouble. I'm sure some of you, it was actually before I was born, believe it or not, but I do remember this. There was a very short lived show prior to their variety show, which was sort of done in the spirit of Bewitched or I Dream of Jeannie. It was one of those fanciful, I guess well, I'm just going to stick with a fantasy shows where one of the main characters is somehow metaphysical. What had happened was Tommy had drowned, and his ghost came back to sometimes help Dickie and sometimes haunt Dickie, depending on the set of circumstances. And they felt that never really gave them the sort of platitude that they worked best in. Hence the variety hour down the road. GR says, "I remember his routine with Mama Cass. It was hilarious." I never saw that one. I love it already, but I never actually saw it. I remember he did a bit with Cher actually, where he convinced her that he was taking over for Sonny because Sonny was ill and couldn't go out, and then Sonny came out like as if he had just like done an escape artist routine, and that Tommy had locked him in his dressing room. It was actually very, very cute, but he was great with Cher. He's one of those people who's best when he has somebody to play off of, and I can see Mama Cat's working very well. Tom says, "Mom always liked you best." Their catchphrase, which again, I guess he used to actually say when things got really, really heated. Now, that comedy variety show that was on CBS, the story goes is if you guys know this for a fact, I'd love it. I've always heard this, and I've heard it as fact, but well, they were of course fired. The show wasn't just canceled. CBS basically said, get off the lot. I heard it was actually canceled during a show. At the half-hour mark, they cut and went with something else for the second half. I'd love to know if that was true. Well, I know it as true. I'd love to know if somebody could confirm that. These days, you really have to confirm the truth. Oh, and again, I don't know. I've seen reruns of their own variety show, and again, I wasn't born until '67. They never seemed particularly controversial to me. I mean, yeah, they still a little close to the wind, but there were a lot of people back then that were making a lot of really much more harsh statements against the government and the war in Vietnam and other things. That well, again, TV is TV. One thing I did find out in my cursory research, I kind of understand why, or at least I can understand why the brothers took a stance in the anti-war movement. I don't know how many of you know this. Apparently, when Tommy was 8 years old, his father died in a Japanese prison camp, and I'm sure that did a lot to pepper his sentiment against war. Again, people who suffered the loss, I think, have the most right to weigh in on those matters. But again, I'm trying to keep this light, so I'm moving forward. Oh, Danny Stanislaw says greetings from South Carolina, and Danny says, "What did I miss?" Well, the big thing, Dan, is that we're talking about the life and I don't want to step on Mr. Steve's toes. The life and tragic end to Tommy Smothers. He died yesterday at the age of 86, and we're talking about some of our famous memories. Apparently, he did a duet with Mama Cass, which when I get off here, I'm gonna find on YouTube. And of course, we all remember him from the variety show and guest spots they did on everything. Again, these people were known to continuously reinvent themselves right up until recently. I mean, they just did a show not too long ago. Oh, and I'm gonna Danny says Dave wanted to do something, but he's traveling. Well, you know what? I am going to, in the honor of Mr. Dave Sundstrom, I am going to commemorate this show on his behalf. Dave, my show on Tommy Smothers today is a tribute post to you and all of the guidance and fellowship you have provided us over the years. God bless. And Keith E says, I lived through this after the show was canceled. About 3 months later, they replayed the show and its entirety. At least that's what they said, and they made a big deal out of it. Oh, so they actually went and played the unaired portion of the show months later. Of course, by that point, the damage was done. They even briefly made a return on, of all places, CBS. Later on, I think CBS maybe kicked themselves for not backing the right conceptual horse. But again, live and learn. Lance Chafin is here. Says, hey, Thrash. Mr. Lance, how you doing? It's so great to see you as always. This is just a little surprise show, unscripted, where we're talking about Tommy Smothers and his tragic loss yesterday. Any key memories of Tommy Smothers? Please read them in the record. I actually want to talk about Richard Smothers for just a second. Actually, one of my favorite non-Smothers Brothers related appearances of his is, of course, in the movie Casino, where he plays the really, really, really skeevy government official, which basically lives out of De Niro's pockets, but then won't back him up when the government comes crashing down on him. It was an amazingly, deliciously horrible role. And Lynn says, R.I.P. Tommy Smothers, prayers to the family. Can you imagine what Richard is going through right now? It actually saddens me just to think about it. I mean, they've been together all these years, obviously, and it must have been tough for them growing up without a father. Their bond would have probably become even tighter still. But the fact that your lifelong career was a duet with this person, again, Mr. Smothers, our condolences go out to you, and I'm sure that that will be a small drop in the bucket. But again, I cannot tell you on behalf of me and all of my viewers how terribly, terribly sorry we are for you. Please take care of yourself. Oh, and Tom says Tommy was also on the Love Boat. Well, who wasn't? I think I was on the Love Boat once. I played a stowaway. Oh, and by the way, remember I was talking earlier about a famous Hollywood celebrity who wouldn't even acknowledge them? Well, the story goes now, it's hard to imagine this in times like now, a period of political consensus and peace, that more tumultuous times cause people to become a little more, I don't want to say uppity, but I will say more, well, they just have the need to make sure everyone else is more socially conscious. And the Smothers Brothers, as we were talking about, were very socially conscious, and they urged other comedians and entertainers to be likewise. And there was one who refused to, there was one who never would, and that was Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby never wanted to be controversial at that time. So he refused to do anything political, and they kind of chided him for it. Well, apparently, Mr. Cosby took tremendous umbrage at this and refused to speak to them afterwards. And Tommy said that years later, he'd see him in the studio or someplace and be like, "Oh, hi, Bill," and go to shake his hand and, like, no hard feelings. The war was, I believe, over at this point, and Bill would not shake his hand, nor would he even acknowledge him or look him in the face until finally, the story goes, Tommy actually at one point told him to blank off. Now, I don't know if he did that figuratively, literally, or just, sort of, but it's an amazing story. And funny how, well, I'm not going to get into this here because that's another post, but how Mr. Sanctimonious got his comeuppance, shall we say. Let's just see. Oh, GR says the routine with Mama Cass had her singing "Dream a Little Dream of Me" to Tommy in bed while he was sleeping. Oh, that must have been totes adorbs. Lance says it's tough to lose a sibling. There always a void there. I can only imagine. I can only imagine. Oh, and Lance asks, "How's my Christmas?" It was very nice. Lance, how was yours? And to all other people in the fellowship at this moment, please, I hope you all had a great Christmas. And John says, "Thanks, Thrash, for showing respect for Tommy. I have to go catch you on the next video." Actually, you're in good company, John. Again, this was just meant to be a quick commemorative post. I almost did it solo. But I feel that I feel that obituary style posts should be done in a fellowship. I believe that we should all sort of reach out to one another and be in contact. So I decided a commemorative post would be best live. That being said, oh, and Len said that his Christmas was good as well. That being said, I think I'm going to have to wrap up actually at this point. I'm very overbooked today, and I wish I could stay longer, but you could say duty calls. But anyway, please, all of you, please take care of yourself. It's been a very rough year, been a very rough decade. There've been some appallingly heavy casualties. We've lost some wonderful, wonderful people, and I miss all of them. And I'm sure we all have personal things that we've lost that we will have to commemorate to ourselves. But I just want to say to all of you, I love you all. Be good, be safe, be careful. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all again very, 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 very soon. Peace.